President Trump posthumously awarded Charlie Kirk with the nation's highest civilian honor, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. In the White House Rose Garden this afternoon, the president presented the award to Kirk's wife, Erika Kirk. Today would have been the conservative activist's 32nd birthday. Kirk, who was a friend and political ally of President Trump, was assassinated last month during a speaking event at Utah Valley University.
But now I can say with confidence, Mr. President, that you have given him the best birthday gift he could ever have.
Thank you.
It's such an honor and the recognition of a life lived for defending freedom. And that's what Charlie fought for until his last breath.
Let's bring in Erika Cortellessa now, senior political correspondent of Time. Eric, you were there this afternoon with almost every prominent conservative figure there to pay tribute to Charlie Kirk. What was that like in that room?
Well, I mean, it was a remarkable event because never before had I ever seen such a confluence of conservative heavy hitters, including some who are rivals within the movement, the MAGA movement, or the broader ideological firmament of the right. People like Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity, who have a famously acrimonious relationship. Every single person who once anchored the 8 o'clock slot on Fox was there in a circle, huddled, talking before the ceremony began. It's Bill O'Reilly, Tucker Carlson, and now Jesse Waters. And, you know, what you really saw was someone who tried to be a coalition builder within the movement. That's one thing that, you know, Charlie Kirk said to me 2 weeks before he was assassinated when he was discussing how he managed the rift between Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump when he was campaigning for Trump and had endorsed him, but was still close with Ron DeSantis and many of his supporters. And he always tried to create something that could outlast individuals. That was part of the core purpose of Turning Point, to build something that could have a sustaining force to keep the conservative movement alive and outlive any figure who was in command of that movement. Obviously, Donald Trump has been in command for the last decade, but what you really saw at this gathering was a group of people who were very committed to trying to keep the kind of nationalist, populist energy a dominant force, not only on the right within Republican Party politics, but in the country more broadly.
Kirk's wife, Erika, accepted that award on behalf of her husband today. She's also taking over at Turning Point USA and Kirk's conservative organization as we look ahead at midterms next year and even the White House up for grabs in 2028. What does the future of that organization look like?
Well, I'll tell you, when I was at the Turning Point campus in Phoenix a month or so ago, I guess it was actually now about 6 weeks ago, I mean, it's a behemoth of an organization. There's 6 different buildings, all dedicated to a different branch of this multi-pronged organization. And what we expect Turning Point to become is something that is very much what Charlie Kirk envisioned, which is at once an advocacy organization pushing for a specific set of policies at the national, state levels, but also something that is trying to recruit young insurgent candidates who can challenge the establishment, people who can keep this movement alive. One thing that Charlie was very proud of was he created a ballot chasing operation designed to take advantage of early voting in key swing states, particularly in Arizona, where he lived, which is about 95% voted home. And they're really doubling down on that in the midterms. They're focusing on a lot of key races. I know that Charlie and Turning Point are very dedicated to helping Andy Biggs be elected the next governor of Arizona. That's one of their pet causes. And of course, Charlie was a big supporter of J.D. Vance. In fact, in my last interview with him, he said if J.D. Vance runs for president in 2028, he would be with him from the start, row one, day one, he said. And so I think basically that is another prevailing view within the hierarchy of Turning Point currently. I think Erika Kirk and other people high up in the organization, Andrew Colvey, Tyler Boyer, are all going to be dedicated to sort of keeping that flame burning in the years ahead.
All right, Erika Cortellessa, thank you so much.
Thank you.